In the first module, you will learn about crew resource management and decision making. The second module is a discussion about threat and error management. Human factors is a science that focuses on the physical and psychological aspects of how the pilot interacts with the airplane, airline personnel, crew members, and policies. The umbrella of human factors includes crew resource management, known as CRM, decision-making, and threat and error management, or TEM. This module will focus on the CRM and decision-making elements. Crew resource management is the effective use of all personnel and material available to the flight crew. Most airline crews have many different resources at their disposal. Other flight crew members provide valuable experience. Cabin crew members have insight into events outside the flight deck. Air traffic control can assist the crew with traffic separation, vectors, airport information, and emergency equipment. Dispatch provides performance, planning, and big-picture information. And maintenance can assist with any equipment failures or abnormal procedures. CRM emphasizes the management of these resources using communication and other interpersonal relationship skills. Decision-making is the systemic approach used to determine the best course of action in response to a given set of circumstances. CRM and decision-making encompass a wide range of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, including situational awareness, problem-solving, and teamwork. We will discuss these skills individually, but keep in mind they are all closely related and frequently overlap one another. How you manage yourself and your resources determines not only your effectiveness, but the effectiveness of the crew as well. Due to the complexity of modern aircraft and airspace, it is more important than ever for crews to apply exceptional CRM skills. Statistics show that over 60% of all accidents are caused by human factors and lack of proper resource management. Your technical and procedural knowledge are the foundation for good CRM skills. The more proficient you are as a crew member, the easier it is to integrate CRM behaviors and techniques into your flying habits. One common misconception is that crew resource management lessens the captain's authority. This is not the case, as the captain is always the final authority for the aircraft's operation. However, other crew members' inquiry, advocacy, and assertion allow the captain to make better and more informed decisions. One of the central principles of good crew resource management is effective communication skills. Crew members must be able to communicate effectively with each other on both a personal and professional level. Any breakdowns in this communication process can lead to benign misunderstandings, errors, or even an accident. The following examples illustrate how the lack of effective communication can cause an accident. In 1977, at Tenerife in the Canary Islands, a KLM 747 and a Pan Am 747 collided, resulting in the worst disaster in aviation history. Much of the cause of this accident was contributed to heavy accents and improper terminology among the Dutch crew, Spanish controller, and the American Pan Am crew. In 1990, a Colombian Avianca 707 crashed while circling outside Kennedy Field in New York due to fuel starvation. In this accident, the Colombian crew told the controllers that they were low on fuel, when declaring a fuel emergency would have resulted in an immediate landing clearance. While these examples illustrate the consequence of poor pilot-controller communication, crew communication is just as important. Two-way communication involves a sender, a message, and a receiver. Effective communication occurs when what the receiver decodes or understands is exactly what the sender intended. A failure of this process results in a breakdown of communication and a resultant misunderstanding. In the process of communicating, barriers may disrupt the transfer process. Examples of barriers to communication include noise from the surrounding environment, multiple communications happening at the same time, fatigue and stress, distractions, ambiguous wording, lack of credibility, lack of rapport, and the use of complex jargon. Cultural differences between crew members can also be a barrier to effective communication. In this world of cultural diversity, it is not uncommon to have two pilots with completely different backgrounds. These backgrounds include different past experiences and interpretations of meanings. When a cultural difference exists, care should be taken to ensure there is a common understanding of what is being said. Effective communications can also be hindered by a person's rank in the flight crew. The captain, as we know, is directly responsible for, and is the final authority to, the operation of the aircraft. A first officer must be able to act as both an assertive individual and as a subordinate in a team atmosphere. Speaking up and voicing an opinion to a superior can be difficult for some. A very fine balance between being assertive and being subordinate must be constantly maintained for proper communications to occur. Not speaking up can have tragic results, as illustrated by Air Florida Flight 90 that crashed into the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. This crash occurred because ice had built up on the engine probes, and the engines failed to reach maximum takeoff thrust. Here is a transcript of the takeoff. In this example, the first officer notices something wrong with the engine instruments. In fact, the first officer states that something is not right multiple times throughout the takeoff roll. However, the captain disregards his concerns and continues the takeoff. If something doesn't look right, call abort during takeoff or go around during landing. This is a case where lack of decisive communication was a factor in an accident. The following are some techniques that can be used to promote a course of action you feel to be correct, even if it involves conflict with others. State your information with appropriate persistence until there is a clear resolution. Question the actions and decisions of others. Seek help from other crew members when necessary. Always question the status and programming of automated systems to confirm situational awareness. And, if you are in a position of leadership, encourage questions and answer them openly and non-defensively. Crew briefings are an effective CRM tool. Crew briefings can be given to all of the crew if desired, but should include the first officer and purser lead flight attendant as a minimum. An effective briefing is clear, concise, and thorough. It should address crew coordination, planning, and any problems that have occurred or are likely to occur. When conducting a briefing, be sure to establish an open and interactive environment. Answer questions directly, listen with patience, and do not interrupt or talk over others. The briefing should establish a team concept. The captain's briefing should cover pertinent safety and security issues, identify any potential problems such as weather, delays, or abnormal system operations, establish guidelines for crew actions centered on standard operating procedures, address crew workload, set expectations for handling deviations from SOPs, and lastly, establish guidelines for the operation of the automation systems, including the duties and responsibilities for the pilot flying and the pilot not flying. Although briefings are typically the captain's responsibility, other crew members may perform a briefing, particularly if it will improve understanding and contribute to the safety of the flight. Good communication skills provide the foundation for good decision-making. Decision-making is the process of reaching a judgment or choosing an option. It involves defining the problem, generating options, assessing the risks and benefits, and finally selecting an option to adopt. The first step in defining a problem is to gather all the relevant information. All likely causes of the problem should be listed before considering a resolution. Having multiple options provides the best odds for success. Be sure to discuss alternative courses of action and ask other crew members for their opinions. Once options have been defined, the risks and benefits should be considered. Brief and discuss these risks and benefits to determine the best course of action. After the discussion, choose an option based on the discussions and available information. After a decision has been made, ensure that all crew members acknowledge and understand the decision. In order to operate safely and efficiently, the flight crew members must act as a coherent team. The extremely low accident rate in commercial aviation demonstrates the success of this teamwork. However, accidents do occur, and in the majority of cases, the crew's performance is cited as a contributing factor. The team itself, not the aircraft or individual pilots, is the root of most accidents and incidents. Good teamwork is a consequence of anticipation and crew coordination, resulting in a smooth and seamless completion of tasks. The skills required for successful teamwork are not always natural. They must be learned and supported through CRM training and practice. The basis for teamwork is crew coordination. Crew coordination is synergistic, taking advantage of the collection of highly skilled individuals. Team collaboration and coordination improves both the detection and resolution of errors. When the coordination breaks down, the crew concept falls apart, resulting in poor communication, procedural errors, and an increased likelihood for an accident or incident. Effective leadership can also contribute to improved crew coordination. In a properly coordinated crew, all members can show leadership. For example, the flight attendants can coordinate the passengers during an emergency. The first officer can manage exterior resources, such as dispatch and ATC. And of course, the captain is always overseeing the entire crew. The captain should always demonstrate the highest level of leadership for the crew. He or she must balance assertiveness with crew member participation. Here are some guidelines that can be adopted as a basis for aviation leadership. Recognize that there is a need to adhere to the standard operating procedures. Allow a group climate appropriate to the situation. For example, social conversations are appropriate during low workload times, but should not occur during high workloads. Recognize the effects of stress and fatigue on an individual's performance. Manage the time available for tasks to be completed. Provide timely decisions when necessary. And finally, when automation decreases situational awareness, reduce the levels of automation appropriately. When building a team, an effective leader must understand the effects of other crew members' personalities and styles. These personalities and styles can be thought of as the prism through which individuals interpret a situation. This interpretation may have undesirable consequences. For example, a captain with an aggressive personality may intimidate a passive first officer who may have valuable insight into a problem. The interpersonal relationships are best managed by setting the correct tone for the flight deck. For example, be relaxed, friendly, and supportive. Remain calm under stressful situations. And during times of low workload, check in with the cabin crew to build trust and maintain communication. The effectiveness of a team or individual can be determined by how they respond to the various demands placed upon them. Commercial flying has always been somewhat of a dichotomy. Much of the time there are few tasks and too much time. At other times there are too many tasks and not enough time. The ideal situation would have the flight crew at peak alertness all the time, and the workload demands would never exceed their ability to cope. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. The demands of flying the airplane, running abnormal and normal checklists, communicating with ATC, the cabin crew, dispatch, and maintenance personnel can easily exceed your multitasking abilities. Fatigue, stress, or interpersonal issues can further complicate the situation and increase the risk of an accident. During a typical flight, crew involvement can vary between low workload situations, where a certain amount of stimulation helps to keep the crew engaged, and high workload situations, where preparation is a key element in managing multiple tasks. As a member of a flight crew, it is essential to remain vigilant at all times. When there is too little stimulation, boredom and complacency can set in. This is typically a concern during longer flights. In these flights, the workload tends to come at the beginning and end of the flight, with low workload in the middle. Complacency should be avoided by performing housekeeping duties and preparing for the high workload situations. Reactions to overloading can vary between individuals. Some people enjoy being overloaded, can easily complete multiple tasks, and seem to thrive on stress. On the other hand, there are others who may become overwhelmed when required to accomplish more than one task at a time. Too many tasks can lead to a workload that can easily exceed the crew's ability to cope. Performance deteriorates, and tasks are shed to focus on key information. Task overload and the distractions that are associated with it can lead to errors. In some cases, this can overwhelm crew members. Typical situations in which task overload may become a factor include during a naturally busy time of flight, such as taxi, takeoff, approach, and landing, when an abnormal situation occurs, when tasks are allowed to accumulate, during a short approach, or if a runway change occurs during a departure or arrival. A good practice is to schedule and allocate tasks evenly between crew members. This reduces the likelihood of one pilot becoming overloaded. If you find yourself becoming task-saturated, communicate to your crew members and distribute the tasks in a more efficient way. Prioritize your tasks. Those relating to the safety of flight should be addressed first. And finally, use applicable automation to allow more time for the required tasks. Situational awareness is a vital component of a successful CRM strategy. Situational awareness can be defined as a person's ability to accurately perceive and comprehend the meaning of different elements in the environment and the projection of their status in the near future. Good situational awareness is more than just perception. It is also understanding the meaning of what you perceive and anticipating changes. Good decision-making is impossible without good situational awareness. However, since situational awareness is a perception of reality, it is quite possible for each crew member's perception to differ. The Air Florida 90 crash in Washington, D.C. that we discussed earlier is a good example of different perceptions. The first officer believed that the engine instruments were indicating an abnormal situation. The captain believed they were normal. Good communication and teamwork fosters a common perception of the state of the aircraft and the surrounding environment. Situational awareness can be broken down into specific elements: geographical, spatial, system, and environmental. Geographical situational awareness includes knowing the location of your aircraft, other aircraft, terrain, navigation waypoints and fixes, and your path. Spatial situational awareness is an understanding of the aircraft's physical state. Elements of spatial situational awareness include attitude, altitude, heading and flight path, and horizontal and vertical speed. System situational awareness involves knowing the aircraft configuration and status. This includes system status, such as fuel and hydraulic quantities, and system configuration, such as flight controls, fuel pumps and valves, anti-ice configuration, etc. It also requires that the crew know the automation flight modes and are able to detect any abnormalities or deviations from the selected settings. Lastly, environmental situational awareness requires that the crew understand the present and forecasted weather along the route and how it can affect flight operations. As human beings, we can only process a limited amount of information and cannot attend to all sources of information at one time. While training can help develop good situational awareness strategies, we must understand our limitations. It is important to recognize when you or your crew has lost situational awareness. This loss can be attributed to ambiguity, fixation, or confusion. Here are some examples. Ambiguity when information from two or more sources doesn't agree. Fixating on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. Failing to fly the aircraft by focusing on non-flying activities. Failing to look outside the aircraft. When everyone is head down, it is difficult to maintain situational awareness. Failing to meet expected checkpoints, ETAs, or fuel burn on the flight plan. Failing to adhere to SOPs. Failing to comply with limitations, minimums, and regulatory requirements. Failing to resolve discrepancies, contradictory data, or personal conflicts. And lastly, failure to communicate concisely and effectively. There are steps that the flight crew can take to prevent the loss of situational awareness, starting at the pre-flight phase. During your pre-flight briefing, determine the crew roles for high workload phases of flight. Develop a plan and assign responsibilities for handling problems and distractions. Solicit input from all the crew members, including cabin, ATC, maintenance, and dispatch. Rotate attention from the plane to path to people. Don't fixate on any one item. Continuously monitor and evaluate your current status relative to your plan. Always project ahead, considering all contingencies. Focus on the details while scanning the big picture. Create visual and/or oral reminders of interrupted tasks. And watch for any clues and speak up when you see situational awareness breakdowns. Stress can be defined as the body's nonspecific response to demands placed on it. These demands can be pleasant or unpleasant in nature. Stress can be the result of many different situations: an engine failure en route, a late check-in at the airport, or problems in your personal life. These issues can influence the effectiveness and efficiency of crew members. To a point, stress serves a good purpose. It can cause a person to focus, adapt to changes, and add motivation to life. In fact, performance of a task will generally improve with the onset of stress, but will peak and begin to degrade rapidly as stress levels exceed a pilot's adaptive abilities to handle the situation. As a result, an increase in the level of stress tends to increase the likelihood for pilot error. Accidents in aviation have occurred when task requirements exceed a pilot's capabilities. The difference between the task requirements and the pilot's capabilities is referred to as the margin of safety. Stress increases as task requirements increase, reducing the margin of safety and increasing the possibility for an error or accident. The lowest margin of safety occurs during approach, when task requirements are at a maximum. Adding any stress, such as fatigue or personal problems, can decrease the safety margin to an unacceptable level. Stress can build up slowly as the result of cumulative events, and can become established well before it is apparent. Pilots may be unaware they are stressed until they are presented with an unusual or busy workload. Excessive stress due to these events may result in a decline in judgment and performance. Therefore, it is important to recognize when stress levels are high and react accordingly. Stress manifests itself with several different symptoms. It is important to be able to recognize these symptoms in yourself and other crew members. Symptoms of stress vary from person to person, but can include physiological symptoms such as sweating and dryness of the mouth, health effects such as nausea, headaches, and sleep problems, behavioral symptoms such as restlessness, shaking, nervous laughter, taking longer to complete tasks, and excessive drinking. Cognitive effects such as poor concentration, indecision, and forgetfulness. And finally, subjective effects such as anxiety, irritability, depression, or aggression. People tend to respond to stress using defensive or coping strategies. Defensive strategies generally involve the alleviation of the symptoms through medication, alcohol, or other means. Coping strategies involve dealing with the source of stress rather than the symptoms. Coping, in general, involves the person adjusting to the situation or changing the situation itself. Delegating workload, prioritizing tasks, or sorting out problems are all methods of coping. Stress can also be alleviated through some relaxation techniques. These include careful regulation of sleep and diet, regular physical exercise, and, if needed, counseling from a supportive friend, colleague, or a professional counselor. While these techniques can be useful in life, they may not apply to specific situations in the flight deck. There are, however, methods to mitigate the effects of stress in flight. Avoid situations that distract you from flying the aircraft. Reduce your workload to reduce the stress level. If an emergency does occur, be calm, think for a moment, weigh alternatives, and then act. Maintain proficiency in your aircraft. Proficiency builds confidence. Don't let little mistakes bother you. Wait until after you land, then analyze past actions. And finally, know and respect your personal limits. Fatigue can play a critical role in flight crew performance. It can be either physiological in the body's need for replenishment and restoration, or subjective in an individual's perception of how sleepy they feel. Fatigue is not only affected by sleep levels and quantity, but also by mental or physical stress, disruptions in circadian rhythms, excess work hours, alcohol, and medications. Fatigue can affect people in different ways. It can diminish perception, causing a general lack of awareness, slow down motor skills and reactions, compromise short-term memory, and reduce the ability to prioritize and complete important tasks. The resultant poor judgment and decision-making may result in mistakes which could compromise the safety of the aircraft. The circadian rhythm is a natural cycle that affects a person's body temperature, hunger, and eating. These rhythms run in cycles of approximately 24 hours. They are controlled by the brain but are influenced by external factors, primarily light. The effect of circadian rhythms on flight crews is significant, as they must adapt to different time zones and varying work schedules. When external stimuli are no longer synchronized with the circadian rhythm, as happens during flights across time zones, jet lag results. Jet lag skews the natural link between daylight and the body's internal clock, causing fatigue during the day and restlessness at night. Given sufficient time, the body will readjust. Understanding these rhythms can help you understand when you are most likely to feel fatigued. Sleep is a necessity of life. It is a natural state of reduced consciousness that restores the body and brain. Most individuals require approximately 8 hours of sleep in any 24-hour period. A short-lived bout of insomnia is generally nothing to worry about. The bigger concern is chronic sleep loss, which can contribute to health problems and is the most significant factor contributing to fatigue. Ensuring you get adequate sleep is the best way to avoid fatigue. CRM encompasses a wide range of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, including communications, situational awareness, problem-solving, decision-making, and teamwork. It has contributed significantly to the reduction of pilot errors, and as a consequence has improved flight safety. Effective CRM and decision-making adds to the synergy of the crew, but it must be remembered that no amount of CRM can make up for basic flying skills.